Welcome into the Husker247 Podcast. I'm Mike Schaefer, joined by Michael Bruntz, Brian Christopherson. It is February 21st. I don't know why you need to know the date, but just in case you are listening to this months later, you'll know we're talking about things that happened around February 21st. Nebraska has a commitment, first one in the 2024 class. You may recall a conversation that we had last week where we discussed who Nebraska's first commitment could be. There was some strong feelings on the podcast that it was going to be one specific player from the state of Texas. Now, it did turn out to be a player from the state of Texas. However, it did not turn out to be a tight end with very strong Nebraska connections. Instead, it is Roger Gradney, a four-star athlete from Texas, who I believe fits the mold of going to get offered by Evan Cooper, who will probably get a quick commitment, has probably never visited Nebraska. Oh, I said all of that. That was me. That was Mike Schaefer. Wow. I'm really good at this. Oh, sorry. Are we podcasting? Michael Bruntz, what are your thoughts? Roger Gradney.
I was gonna express some contrition, but I don't know that I'm going to now. But yes, you were correct. You got the out of left field commitment from a four-star top 247 athlete, Roger Gradney.
Left field, but somehow not left field.
Yeah, left field, but a pretty good football player and a guy that runs track.
Left center, is that fair?
Yeah,
deep in the power alley.
It's out there. But so Roger Gradney, for anybody that's familiar with their Texas geography, is in Altair, Texas, which is a smallish town, kind of in flyover country in Texas. And Nebraska had been talking to him for quite a while, actually, before the offer came this weekend from Evan Cooper and Omar Hales, and he jumped on it. And it's interesting. We've heard in the hours since the commitment that the offer list and the ranking really don't match. And he's a top 247 athlete, four-star recruit. His other offers, I believe, are Campbell, Texas Tech, and UTSA. And Nebraska comes in and offers, and he takes the commitment. Kind of an interesting guy because as a sophomore, just a freak athlete, football player, scored touchdowns as a runner, receiver, punt returner, kick returner. Could play offense, could play defense. He's also I think a 10-8 guy in the 100. Has a good 200 time. He also throws the disc and does some triple jump too. And you might be saying, well, why was nobody in Texas on this kid? Well, he missed most of his junior season with an injury. Wasn't really putting his name out there a ton at camps, and hadn't even really updated his huddle film. And I think a lot of the schools that were talking to him, and there were Power 5 schools that have been talking to him for quite a while. Notre Dame was another one. Kind of thought that they kind of had him stashed away a little bit. And Nebraska was also one of those schools that immediately started talking to him when Matt Rule and his staff came in November, and they were rewarded with a commitment. So definitely an unexpected one. As we sat last week, Schaefer smartly took the field, and Nebraska now has their 2024 class off with some momentum with a guy that is definitely, you had to do your homework on to find him.
Bruntz, how many classes, if I just drew the random cycle at you, do you think you could name the number one or the first commitment of over the last, let's say, 8 to 10 years?
I'd
put you down for 4. I bet you could get 4.
Not specific names, but like there was the edge rusher from Florida. I'm blanking on his name.
RJ Sorensen.
The other kid.
I don't know if you have to give me more than that.
The other one from Miami. He came up here for a year and then left.
The other one from Miami.
It wasn't
which year?
I'm looking right now.
Okay, because there's some that I just have distinctly built into my brain because it just sort of timed out. Like Eric Lee is nominally the first commitment of the 2014 recruiting class or the 2015 recruiting class. But that came at the same time as like they got Avery Anderson, Christian Gaylord, and Kendall Bussey all in like the same weekend. Willie Hampton was the
That was
first.
his name. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, outside linebacker, I'm pretty sure, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so Willie Hampton was the first for Mike Riley, I believe. And then you get kind of the weird ones where like Garrett Nelson was the first commitment in the 2019 recruiting class, but he also had committed to the previous staff, like going into his junior year. So it's kind of just like there's some different sort of ones in there, but there's always a little bit of a story with whoever the first of any class is.
Do I get credit if I name Cam Jurgens since he committed 3 years early? Does that count?
Was he the first for 2018 then?
I'm looking now.
This would be a good story.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about actually doing this, so it would probably read better than it's going to listen for most people having to suffer through this.
For the guys, yeah. I don't know. It's Jurgens.
Michael Rose Ivy was 2012.
Was he?
Yeah.
Was he the first guy in that class?
Yeah.
Jurgens would have been 18 in the 18 class.
Okay. Teddy Prohaska would have been 2021. Henry Lutovsky followed him.
Yep. You need to put this to paper. That'd be good.
All right. Well, now people that have listened to it can either have read the story before they listen to this or go check the story out, which you can find at Husker247, where there's plenty of great content all the time. Oh, sorry. We had plenty of podcasts left. Just routine there. All right. Roger Gradney. So, BC, what does it kind of say about the staff, like, and how they sort of go about recruiting? I mean, they added a guy sight unseen. That somebody that they clearly have, a high opinion of down in Texas. And again, it feels like it has the fingerprints of Evan Cooper watching a lot of film and just seeing somebody that kind of flashed for him, even if it's not junior film.
I mean, we've definitely got a trust your own eval staff on our hands. And that you can't say that everywhere. I think Nebraska is going to be one of those coaching staffs where Nebraska and Texas Tech offer the same guy. We know that. Even Matt Rule, even at his one press conference, said if you'll probably see Texas Tech on the list of a lot of the same guys we're after with what Joey McGuire's doing down there. But there's going to be other programs that then jump in and try to follow suit. But it's a big deal when you're first on the case. It really is in some of these. Recruits don't forget that. They remember who their day ones. Are the kids still saying that your day ones were? The Bruntz, no?
Bruntz is the closest to the youth in this podcast. So
I'm the last person to be asking that.
Another day ones yet? I don't know.
Daniel Tiger, is he a day one?
Yeah, I don't know. I got nothing for you, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think
it's so sad.
We're so old. I think the fact that you're first on the case means a lot, and it's going to be fun because you mentioned Notre Dame maybe had him in their stashed away pile. That's like a sort of interesting segment of recruiting now too. It's hard to do, but there are these big programs that have this little pile of guys over here, and they're like, maybe we can kind of keep them, under the radar as long as possible. But then you got to know when to kind of push that button and say, all right, let's go with this, And it seems like Nebraska timed that very well in this case because this is probably a prospect who was going to pick up more steam if he went to some camps and all that. And then you're in an elbows out fight with 20 schools. And now you've got the head up on everybody. Obviously, you got to hold them in the class. But, recruits down in Texas are also looking at this staff and saying, it's up in Nebraska, but it feels a little bit like a home flavor to me with these guys. I mean, they know this state and area so well, and they really respect Texas from what they've done there in the past. And I think that's going to be appealing. And again, he's another guy who he just does everything as far as different sports, which his staff likes, and he's got it on paper. He's got the data there. And, Rule talked about with like Jeremiah Charles when they got him. He like heard his triple jump numbers, and he's like, that's always going to raise my eyebrows, and I'm going to be like, all right, let's look at the film. Here's another guy who's a great triple jumper. He's got explosion and stuff like that. And kind of a can-do attitude. He wants to play every position. He had a great quote about how he even wanted to play like D-end and stuff like that. And I think he's 190 pounds. So very interesting prospect, sort of a fun one to get this class going. And, he's a 4-star recruit too. This is not just some guy who was off the, who nobody knew about. He's a guy who plays very well in the recruiting rankings.
It's interesting. This all happened on Sunday, right? The offer and everything came about on Sunday during the day?
Yes.
And then he committed by Monday night?
Yeah. I mean, he basically committed that day and was waiting to announce. He's interesting, though, because he has the speed and athleticism. From talking to people in Texas, that he could try to play wide receiver. I think he fits more on the defensive side of the ball, but he's got the athletic profile that's kind of intriguing in a 3-3-5 because he's a potential, smallish linebacker, rover type. He can play safety. He's played a little bit of corner. And, I think with him too, and you look at like kind of where things are trending, I guess, in defensive players that get drafted in the NFL, a lot of those guys have experience having played offense. They're both sides of the ball type guys. And, that they're not kind of the ready-made, like rocked out, like 230-pound linebackers with big neck rolls that I think a lot of people still think about when they think defensive recruiting. So it's an evaluation, a good evaluation by Nebraska, but I think they, there's a lot to like. I mean, he's playing at 3A level in Texas, which is a really small school. I just looked it up. According to Wikipedia, Altair had an estimated population of 30 in 2000. But there's going to be an adjustment level for competition level. But the thing that Matt Rule always is going to go back to is that, do you have that grounded in the athleticism and just being a good football player? And I think that's what he's got.
They are absolutely not afraid to go into places that are not hotbeds in Texas. I mean, Bryce Turner was in Bay City. Bay City hadn't had a D1 recruit in a long time. I mean, so it's that kind of just like, I think I don't know if it was you or BC that said that they're just very much a trust their own evaluation staff. I mean, that lends itself even to stuff like where they're willing to go. If a guy's athletic numbers meet whatever they're looking at, it doesn't matter. Like if they play at a lower competition or a higher competition, Nebraska is interested. We're gonna shift gears real slightly here, but before we get there, I'm gonna ask a potentially strange question. Brian, when did you graduate high school?
1999.
Nebraska just offered an 8th grader who will graduate in 2027. He will graduate high school and be eligible to play college football in 2027. Nebraska just offered Tory Pittman II. Do I have that right, Bruntz? I believe you wrote about
third,
him.
I believe.
Tory Pittman III, who is at Buffett Middle School and expected to attend Omaha Central next year. This, as far as I know, is the first time Nebraska has offered a sitting 8th grader an in-state scholarship. So a little bit of a watershed moment there. And just, it's also remarkable to think of the phrase 2027. So I just wanted to use BC's old age to really kind of drive that home.
What have to do with anything, really? It's like they also offered that you're right, that was the first in-state guy, but they offered, is it Trent Seaborn Bruntz, the QB, the 27 QB who like won a state title in 8th grade down
Alabama.
But he's got a ton of Seaborn does, so Nebraska's not sitting out there by themselves on that one.
Yeah, you've got two 27 offers out there right now, which is kind of remarkable. But the Seaborn one's kind of funny because I mean one of the people on our network, his kids go to that school. that he plays at, and I don't think there's too much doubt that he's going to be a pretty decent quarterback down there. I mean, that's like high level Alabama football as an 8th grader is pretty impressive. But Tory Pittman III. We're getting into 8th grade now, and not surprisingly, Buffett Middle School was not listed as a school in our system. So just went ahead and put him with Omaha Central.
Wow! Just what if he decides to change schools?
We can change that, but we don't have Buffett as an option.
All right. Well, that's exciting. Anything else we want to get to recruiting football wise? Anything else happen?
I don't think so. I mean, does it feel like to you guys there's momentum with 24? I mean, it felt like there already was, given the list that's kind of coming together tentatively for that March 25th weekend. But I don't know. I guess it feels different once you get the first commitment for the class. You break the seal.
I think that Nebraska will have multiple commitments more before they get to that big weekend at the end of the month. Like I was surprised last week when I asked if you thought they would have a commitment by that weekend, and you both, or at least one of you, said no. I think they're going to have several more people. I also think this is a staff more than what we've seen in the past that are both willing to push for and also take commitments from guys that have yet to visit Nebraska. So I think we're going to see that. Not a ton necessarily, but I think you'll see it more than kind of what we become accustomed to, where you're usually talking about 1, 2, sometimes 3 visits before someone's ready to provide that commitment to Nebraska. So that's kind of where I'm at with. But I agree with the general idea. I think there's definitely some momentum for them on the trail, and I wouldn't be surprised, like I said, if they have 3, maybe 4 commitments by the time that March weekend rolls around.
And Gradney will be he's planning on being up here that weekend, the March 25th weekend too. So
pretty much hitting or getting close to double digits of guys saying that they're going to be there that weekend, which again, I always sort of say this, and especially when you're talking about unofficial visits, these things are so fluid. I mean, they're, I'm probably a little cautious when it comes to like putting these lists together, just because I feel like by the time you actually get to the event, it changes so much. But right now, about a month out, it looks pretty good for Nebraska at the end of March. We'll dive into that more in the coming weeks. But we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to get into basketball. Nebraska basketball is just rolling. We will get into their latest win, a overtime victory over Maryland. And we will have the opposite of that discussion as Michael Bruntz attempts to explain the bullpen strategy for Nebraska baseball and why it didn't work out in sunny San Diego. All that and more on the Husker247 podcast. Nebraska basketball got another big victory on Sunday night, hosted Maryland in a game that went into overtime. It's a weird game. I don't know how much, I think both of you had stuff going on. I don't know how much either of you were able to watch that game on Sunday, but it was pretty choppy even before the officials changed their strategy of not blowing the whistle in the first half to calling 10 fouls before the first media timeout on the second half on Sunday. But there wasn't a lot of flow, but the game basically broke down into 2 parts. There was Nebraska with Sam Greisel on the floor, and then there was Nebraska without Sam Greisel on the floor. Basically, when he wasn't around, the offense struggled a lot, and the defense did not play nearly as well. It's kind of surprising to me, just combing through that box score, guys. There's so many people that had such a big effect on that game, and it had really nothing to do with their points, but it was what they were providing on the defensive end, because Maryland was flustered throughout that contest.
Yeah, everybody's doing their little niche right now really well. I mean, like Blaze, Blaze had 1 point, didn't he?
Yeah, 1 point, 8 rebounds, a block, and a steal. And honestly, it felt like he had, 15 rebounds, with as much as he was in there mixing it up against several bigs for Maryland.
A fun thing about Blaze too is he's been taking big charges in these critical moments. And you go back to the preseason, And Hoiberg like mentioned that offhand, like, oh yeah, Keita leads the team in charges taken in practice. And it's one of those things you're kind of like, yeah, like that'll matter. You kind of you kind of paw that away. You think it's not going to come into play, and it's been huge in these critical moments of games. Him standing tall and just having a knack for that skill, which when it's deciding games, that one possession going the other way with it. And by the way, I love officials who make dramatic charge calls, like who really like get their body into it. Bruntz doesn't, but I do. But I mean, like, and then Sammy Hoiberg, what can you say? I mean, when he comes in, he just makes something good happen. Usually, he's really a really solid defender for his measurables. Like they'll put him on at the top scorer sometimes even, and he'll make the guy work for it. And obviously, he had the big steal everyone will talk about, but people could go back a week before that against Wisconsin when he came from the back and had that steal in overtime that kind of put Nebraska in charge of that game. So Sam has just been clutch beyond belief, and it's not just on defense. I mean, he's hitting the free throws when he's asked to do that, and every guy has sort of accepted like that they may play 20 minutes in a game, and then there's going to be games where they play 5 minutes, but they're going to get use out of that time.
I thought that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So, to your point about Hoiberg, there was I want to say it was kind of late-ish in the second half where the ball was swung around to him on the 3-point line, and there was like no hesitation. I mean, that
splashed it.
Yeah, and just being ready for the moment almost. It just he's playing really impressively. I thought BC's correct about his defense. I mean, he's just he's pesky, and I was shocked. Maybe I shouldn't be, but like the charge that he drew late in that game where he kind of like he was like the off-ball defender and he kind of slid. It was, I don't know, maybe a charge. There were a couple plays in that second half that Nebraska got call-wise where I was like, I don't know. Like the one where Casey was kind of bailed out at the 3-point line and they actually called the foul on Maryland. I was like, I don't know about that. But no, Hoiberg's been great. And they needed somebody to kind of step in and be that reliable energy guy. He's been great. And he's also, providing some scoring punch too. So it was a fun game to watch. I went back and watched it at like 2 a.m, but good God, that was one of the more clunkier games that I can remember just in terms of flow and officiating. And there's been some real stinkers the last few years that I can remember.
Yeah, it's probably not a game that officiating crew is going to submit to their best games of 2022-23 highlight reel. I want to hit on a couple things here. One, what I like about Hoiberg is it feels like you're witnessing someone just bringing out every single ounce of talent they have in them. Like it's like the opposite of like the Isaiah Roby thing where, the dumb question would get asked, does he realize how good he is or how talented he is or how much potential he has? And I think it's sort of the opposite with Hoiberg where it's just like he's getting everything that he can do. He's just getting every single piece of his ability in it. I mean, this isn't a guy that you're expecting to go for double figures ever, but he's able to get there in crunch time. He's hitting free throws. He hit that huge 3-pointer. Nebraska only made 3 3-pointers in a basketball game in 2023, and they managed to win it against another Power 5 opponent. Like that's pretty remarkable anymore. And Casey made 2 of them, and Hoiberg had the other, and it was big. And it speaks to where this is kind of all going. After the game, Derrick Walker talked about, with Blaise Keita specifically, but this is sort of true, and it hits on what BC said. Blaise Keita, he basically said Blaise understands what the role is that we need from him. And you sort of get that with a bunch of these guys. Like Sam Hoiberg knows why he's going in the game. It's to provide a little bit of ball handling, and it's to play up-tempo, in-your-face defense. And when there's an opportunity to take a shot, take it. When there's an opportunity to go for the steal, go for it. And I think getting those contributions and when guys kind of have an understanding of what it is, like you only get 15 minutes on the court, make the most of them. And I think you're seeing guys like Blaze and Sam Hoiberg really do that. And then other players are kind of feeding off of it. And they're kind of a tricky team at the moment. Like you have Derrick Walker, who's like 35 years old, throwing every YMCA move at some of these guys. I mean, they have a tough time staying in front of him. He's able to get his elbows buried into people and can spin them around. I mean, you have that. Casey is hot right now from outside, so you have to really sort of extend. And then he's really gotten very good at just his ability to get open on those cuts. And it's not just Derrick Walker anymore. You have different guys that are comfortable throwing some tight passes to him, and he can get a shot off so quickly that even his layups are kind of like, whoa, where did that come from? So I just think they're playing at a really high level. Big game against Minnesota coming up, not so much because of Minnesota's record, but they can't have a letdown. Like, they can't give everything back. This is a sort of great spot for a letdown here. And so I think Hoiberg knows that. I think this team knows that. So they've got to kind of come out hard this week and really sort of be ready to go on Saturday.
Yeah. It's Derrick Walker. I'm glad you were talking him up, because it can be easy to take for granted what he's doing this year. And he does have that occasional game where, yes, he might have that 6 or 7 turnover game that pops up. But if you think about it, you're asking so much of a big to be a facilitator like that, and that's going to happen on occasion. And the fact he's can get his, but also is so good at sharing the ball and knowing how to be that guy. Man, he's going to be missed so much. And I thought Nick Baugh, who was doing the broadcast, he did a good breakdown at halftime of sort of the compromising spots Nebraska is putting defenses in right now with when the ball goes to Walker, and the guys, like Tominaga are cutting well, but they can also on certain occasions be window dressing, basically, where it's like, are they going to cut to the hole or no, they're just clearing out on the sides, and it gives Walker that one-on-one where, like you say, it's whatever YMCA game or not, it's tough to stop. He just gets that big body on a guy, and it's like old man strength, it's like these guys are great college athletes and stuff like that, but it's like that's a real man there who's like fix some pipes and stuff like that in his life, and he's just gonna get stuff done, and he usually does.
I mean, there's a big difference between being 25 and 18. I mean, let's be honest. Like, that's what you're dealing with there.
I'm not sure he's only 25. It seems older.
The age is one thing, but the best skill that he has, to me, his touch on the rim, like his just ability of when to kind of put pressure on it, when to go for the backboard, when to like how to just drop it right on the front of the rim. Like, if Alex March had that kind of touch, he'd average like 35 points a game for Doc Sadler instead of missing. Like, you know what I mean? The Walker's touch and his shooting percentage are so remarkable because he's just like, he's surrounded by people. He's very rarely ever getting just point blank wide open looks. I mean, I think he had kind of an easy dunk on Saturday or on Sunday, but everything else, I mean, he had the Maryland defenders were just in him the entire way. Like, I can't get over how just even that simple drop hook he has, like he just has that down pat. We haven't seen a Nebraska big with that kind of touch at the rim almost really since like Vincent Hamilton. I don't even know if he necessarily qualifies. Like, I'm at the edge of my memory thinking of like post players that could legitimately score in the paint. And Maric was solid, but it just felt like he gave away so many like 4-footers. You never really get that with Walker.
Yeah, shooting 60% on the field, 60% on the season from the field. Like, that's pretty good. Pretty good.
Did you guys think so? We're going long on this, and I apologize, but I just thought it was a great game. So, Bruntz, you said you rewatched it. BCU obviously caught it. They struggled to get that inbounds in. They're down 2 in the end of regulation. Call the timeout. They finally just have to throw it to Walker. I don't know what the play call was, but do you think that was just like him like, I just got to go do this? Like, he just took his guy to the basket. Nice left-handed layup finish. I just thought that was like a guy basically saying, you know what? I don't know what the play is anymore. We just need someone to go do something. And he went and did it.
Yeah, I think those types of plays just, show the amount of trust that Fred has in him. I mean, to basically have your center be your offensive facilitator, you have to be a pretty special player anyways. And I think that's the value of having, the veteran guys like Griesel and Walker. And Bandamel was kind of the same way whenever he was healthy. Was, you can draw up whatever the heck you want on a grease board, but sometime like you either just got to go make a shot, make a play, or make a winning play that's going to, put your team up. And Walker's done that a ton, and is probably still underappreciated for the amount of times he's done that. It's the same way, with Griesel at times where he just posts a guy up and just makes a shot over him. That's just what the moment calls for. And Walker was just fantastic in that game. And I always think too, when you start getting to this point in the season, you start having the veteran guys that start doing the math on how many games they've got left. And I think you kind of start to see a little bump in those situations of guys just playing a little bit better, knowing that there's not much time left.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. I don't know. We'll have maybe a chance to talk about it Tuesday next week. That game, Nebraska's game after Minnesota is an 8:00 start at home against Michigan State. How confident are you that they can just handle their business against Minnesota? They're the worst team in the Big Ten. Nebraska beat them on the road. It's one of their 2 road wins this year in conference play. BC, are you confident that Nebraska can handle their business at home against Minnesota? No hiccup. They just show up, workmanlike, get it done.
I'd favor them, but it's a bit of a worrisome game to me because it's that one where everyone's going to, throughout the week, there's sort of going to be that thought like, okay, they're going to be above 500, that chatter in the air, and the NIT postseason talk. I do love that, maybe the NIT is the ceiling for the, what this group can reach, but guys like Derrick Walker and those guys are understanding of like how big that would be for this program. And so some years, you guys know, like if you're talking about a team that was trying to play their way in the NIT, people's like, who cares,
Right.
It's completely the opposite around here, and everybody understands that. So I love that there's a carrot that's right out there, and it's exciting for people. But I am a touch concerned about Minnesota. They played Illinois they're that type of team who they have a terrible record, but if you look at some games, they can show up and they're within 6-8 points late in the game against teams that are talented. So you got to watch your step against them.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. Bruntz, you ready to talk baseball?
If we must.
Have you recovered? It's a lot of radio time. It's a lot of having to watch a bad website.
The WCC network held up pretty well. It held up better than the Nebraska bullpen this weekend.
What didn't hold up better than the bullpen this weekend?
Yeah. That I can think of a few just really strange games that I've covered in the decade plus of doing this with Nebraska baseball. There was one against like Wichita State where Nebraska just could not throw strikes. I think they walked. It was like 16 or 18 guys, like some just ungodly number.
It was under Erstad, right?
Yeah. And I don't know that I can recall a 16-16 7-inning game where one of the teams only had 7 hits. Like it was just inexplicable. Nebraska gives up 9 runs in an inning, turns around and scores 12 straight, and then gives up a 6-run lead in the 7th inning and basically has to bag up the bats and head to the airport to fly home. So I don't know. I just kind of the overall takeaway. The offense was good enough to win at least 2 games. I like the way that they bounced back. I think this is a team that's going to hit a lot more than what they did a year ago, which is they needed to do. I thought the first two starters, Kaminska and Olsen, pitched probably well enough to win. I think they're going to be solid. But man, I mean, I don't know that there's anything worse as a baseball player when you can't throw strikes. Like you're just standing out there with your pants down. There's just no answer. I mean, probably the only thing worse is sitting in the dugout watching it happen. I mean, that's kind of what it was on Monday. And, it wasn't just like it was just, freshmen that were doing it. It was, you had Shea Shanneman, your 5th-year guy out there. Mason Ornelas comes in and it's the same thing. I mean, he was in a tough spot. He probably wasn't thinking he's coming into that game in the 7th inning with a 6-run lead, but just not a big concern, I think, going forward is what your roles are going to be. I don't think you learn much at all about who you can count on to get outs when the lights are on in that series. And that's a concern.
So we saw this and we've seen this for a few years. Whenever Nebraska kind of starts off and it starts a little slow, you get people wondering, why is the scheduling strategy, why not try to find a little bit easier of an opponent, maybe play somebody more closer in the Midwest, comparable sort of weather situation than going out to California and playing these, it was San Diego this time, but we've seen it where Nebraska starts off with Oregon State right off the bat. So what are your thoughts on that, Bruntz, with how they choose to schedule?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can have it both ways. You look at a team like Iowa who goes to, I think they're in Florida, and they played like Quinnipiac, I think is how you say the name of the school.
Quinnipiac?
Yeah, they played them for 2 games, and like Illinois or Indiana State for 1. And the reason that Nebraska does that is because they want to host baseball in June. And unfortunately, with the way the Big Ten is and the way that RPI works, in order to do that, you either have to play tough opponents and win some of them early in the season, or you have to essentially like run the table against lesser opponents through the non-con schedule and then win a bunch of them in Big Ten play. So your margin's thin one of 2 ways. I do sometimes wonder if it would make more sense to play the Quinnipiacs, the Furmans, the New Jersey Institute of Technology, if they have a baseball team.
They made a regional.
They did play them the first weekend, and then lean into it a little bit more the second and third weekend with a team in Texas, or like what Nebraska's doing this year, where they're going to Minnesota and playing Vanderbilt and Ole Miss. Like, it's like I said, I understand why they do it. I think history has shown at Nebraska that even if you're able to get outside a little bit in January, you're still at a competitive disadvantage somewhat when you're facing those kinds of teams. So that's why. But I think you asked me last week which kind of takes the longest to come around. I can't remember what I said, but I hope I said pitching, because that was the answer.
Yeah, I think we've seen it, with Nebraska over the last decade, where you've gotten the hitting starts out okay and the pitching isn't there, or the pitching is fine and they can't string together 3 hits in an inning. So, I mean, unfortunately with baseball, it's sometimes really hard to get both working at the same time. I do want to say, I mean, it does feel like some of the guys that they've added, or some of the more fresh faces. I mean, Dylan Carey started red hot, and he looks like he can be a guy for him. I mean, so if the bats continue to play up, and really, I think the biggest bummer of all of them would have been Friday, right? Because frankly, they let a half dozen or more chances go by with runners in scoring position and unable to kind of get those guys in, and you give away sort of a close game there. So they not only did Nebraska go 0-3-1, they managed to do it in unique and obnoxiously annoying ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's that box score probably deserves to go in some kind of file that you just kind of have ready to go.
Right there with the Chicago State one?
With Chicago State, with the regional game where Nebraska beat UConn inexplicably, despite being massively out hit a few years ago. It's I get I get a lot of it on social media about the hand wringing. I mean, it's still a very long season. There's concerns, I think, with the way the bullpen pitched, but we'll see if they can get things turned around a little bit. It feels like a group that's a little bit more capable of handling something like what they experienced versus last year's team, which I don't think would have handled that nearly as well. But they've got 3 at South Alabama this week, and they're going to have to get it turned around. In addition to the scheduling kind of tough, I think it's pretty tough to go with a 4-game series right out of the gates too, because
you don't have that depth.
Man, even before they threw out that first pitch on Monday, it was like this has the potential to be a pretty high scoring game just based on how everything lined up.
Do you I had a very good question. It was really good and it just completely disappeared. And I didn't do the thing where I created a way to remember it. So I guess I don't really have anything else at this point because it was a great question, Bruntz. It was going to lead to a fantastic conversation, but I suppose we will just survive and we'll finish with this. What record do you think they kind of need to be at as they get through non-conference to give themselves a chance to potentially be an at-large bid if they don't win the Big Ten outright? Is 500, is that good enough?
Through the first 3 weeks?
Through the first non-conference before they get into conference play.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking more of these first 3 weekends because I mean, if you somehow beat one of the 2 SEC teams in Minnesota, that's going to be huge for RPI purposes. South Alabama, I mean, if you find a way to win that series too, or even just one game down there, that still works in your favor. But I don't know. I mean, I think you probably have to be better than 500. I mean, you're basically not leaving the state of Nebraska from March 8th until April 7th, sometime in there. So you got to start racking up some wins in those 3 weeks in March. So I would probably go a little bit north of 500 and hopefully a signature win or two in these first 3 weeks.
All right, there you have it. I'm sure we'll be back talking more baseball next week. Brian Christopherson had already dropped off the podcast, so we wish him goodbye as well. Bruntz, thanks for stopping in. We'll be back with another podcast later this week. Be sure to stop by Husker247. Plenty of great stuff on the site. Nebraska picked up their first commitment. As mentioned in this podcast, I'll have a story on other first commitments in the cycle and how that has worked out for the Huskers over the last few years. All that and more can be found at Husker247. We'll catch you later this week with another podcast.